The brass bell above the heavy oak door of La Dolce chimed, a cheerful sound that usually announced the arrival of fur coats and expensive perfumes. But this time, it only ushered in a biting gust of Chicago wind and two shivering figures who looked like they had been carved out of the gray winter shadows. Keisha stepped onto the plush cream-colored carpet, her dark skin ashen from the cold, pulling her thin, fraying coat tighter around her shoulders. Beside her, 7-year-old Maya pressed close to her mother's leg, her small hand clutching Keisha's worn denim jeans, her black braids tucked under a knit hat that had seen better days. Inside, the bakery was a golden sanctuary of wealth. The air smelled of caramelized sugar and privilege. Around them, the clientele was almost exclusively white, dressed in holiday silks and pearls. As soon as Keisha and Maya entered, the atmosphere shifted. The hum of polite conversation died instantly. A woman at the nearest table instinctively pulled her designer handbag closer to her chest, her eyes narrowing as she scanned Keisha from head to toe. It was a look Keisha knew, well, the look that said you don't belong here. In the corner booth, obscured by the shadows of a large fern, an older man in a tailored suit sat silently. Don Salvatore twisted a gold ring on his pinky finger, his dark eyes shifting from the snowy street outside to the scene unfolding before him. He saw the way the room recoiled, not just because the mother and daughter were poor, but because their presence disrupted the pristine white image of the establishment. Before they could even reach the glass display case, a wall of perfume and disdain blocked their path. It was Mrs. Patty, the manager. She was a woman who wore her prejudice like armor, hidden beneath a tight, forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Deliveries are in the back," Mrs. Patty said loudly, her voice cutting through the jazz music. Then, realizing they carried no packages, her lip curled. "Oh, you aren't drivers. We don't allow loitering. This is a private establishment for paying customers." Keisha swallowed her pride, a bitter pill she had tasted too often. She kept her head high, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "We aren't loitering, ma'am. My daughter." Maya peeked out from behind her mother's leg, her big brown eyes wide with hunger as she stared at a strawberry cake in the case. "Please," Keisha whispered, her voice trembling. "It's her birthday. She's 7 today. I have $3. Do you maybe have an expired cake? Just a small slice? Something you were going to throw away." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mrs. Patty let out a sharp, incredulous laugh that drew the attention of the entire room. "Expired?" Mrs. Patty repeated, her tone dripping with disgust. She looked around at her customers, seeking their validation. "We don't sell trash here. And we certainly don't serve your kind of people. Look at you. You're scaring my customers. We don't want any trouble." The racial undertone in your kind hung heavy in the air. It wasn't just about money. It was about the color of their skin in a place that clearly didn't welcome it. Maya lowered her head, a single tear slipping down her cold cheek. Keisha nodded slowly, the hope extinguishing in her chest as the humiliation burned her face. "I understand," Keisha choked out. She turned to leave, pulling Maya toward the biting cold of the door, defeated by a world that judged them before they even spoke. But they never made it to the exit. From the dark corner of the room, a heavy wooden chair scraped violently against the marble floor, a harsh, screeching sound that stopped every heart in the room. The entire bakery held its breath. Don Salvatore stepped out of the shadows, his cashmere coat brushing against the tables as he walked. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a storm cloud moving indoors. His presence was so commanding that Mrs. Patty took a step back, her hand fluttering nervously to her throat. "Mr. Costa," Mrs. Patty stammered, her voice pitching higher, trying to regain composure. "I apologize for the disturbance. I was just removing these people. You know how it is. We can't have them wandering in from the streets. It ruins the image for our respectable customers." She emphasized the word respectable while casting a side eye at Keisha's dark skin and coiled braids, drawing a clear, invisible line between us and them. Salvatore ignored her completely. He walked past the manager as if she were nothing more than a coat rack and stopped directly in front of Keisha and Maya. Up close, the contrast was stark. The older, powerful Italian man in his expensive suit towering over the exhausted black mother and her tiny daughter. Keisha stiffened, instinctively pulling Maya behind her leg. She had learned the hard way that in this part of the city, attention from powerful white men rarely meant anything good. But Salvatore didn't shout. He didn't scoff. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt on one knee until he was eye level with Maya. He looked at her beautiful dark face, framed by frayed ribbons in her hair, and saw not a nuisance, but a child. "Hello, Bella," Salvatore said, his voice dropping to a gentle rumble that only they could hear. "That is a very pretty dress you have on. Pink is my favorite color, too." Maya blinked, surprised that this scary-looking man was speaking to her so softly. "It's old," she whispered. "It is distinctive," Salvatore corrected with a wink. Then he looked up at Keisha, his eyes softening. "I heard it is a special day." "Sir, please," Mrs. Patty interrupted, gaining her confidence back. She stepped forward, her face twisting in ugly annoyance. "Don't waste your time. They are just beggars. They probably want money for drugs. It's what they always do." The air in the room turned frigid. The racial slur hung unspoken but heavy in the word, they. Salvatore stood up slowly. He turned to Mrs. Patty, and the warmth vanished from his face, replaced by a look so cold it could freeze boiling water. "They," Salvatore repeated, his voice dangerously low. "When I look at this woman, I see a mother trying to feed her child. But when I look at you, Patty, do you know what I see?" Mrs. Patty froze. I don't. "I see someone whose soul is uglier than any expired cake," Salvatore said. He reached into his jacket, and the room tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a thick leather wallet. He slammed 5 crisp $100 bills onto the glass counter. The sound cracked like a whip. "I am buying that strawberry cake," Salvatore declared, his voice booming now, addressing every silent, judging face in the room. "In fact, I am buying every single cake in this case. Pack them up." All of them?" Mrs. Patty stuttered, staring at the money. "All of them," Salvatore confirmed. "And you will apologize to this lady. You will look her in the eye, and you will show her the respect she deserves. Not because I have money, but because she is a human being. Do it." Mrs. Patty's face flushed a deep red. She looked at Keisha, at the black woman she had tried to throw out like trash, and then at the stack of money. Greed and fear warred with her prejudice. Finally, she lowered her head. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, not daring to meet Keisha's gaze. "Louder," Salvatore commanded. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. Salvatore turned back to Keisha, offering her a genuine, gentle smile. "Please allow me to get the door for you. The air in here has suddenly become very stale." As he escorted them toward the exit, carrying the large box of the finest strawberry cake himself, Salvatore caught his reflection in the glass door. His smile faded. Outside, across the snowy street, 2 men in a silver car were watching. They weren't looking at the bakery. They were looking at him. "Get down." The command didn't come from a polite gentleman, but from a general used to war. Before Keisha could even process the change in his tone, Salvatore shoved her and Maya into the back seat of a sleek, black Lincoln Town car that had screeched to the curb. He dove in after them, and the heavy door slammed shut with a thud that sounded like a bank vault locking. "Go, Tony." Code red. Salvatore barked at the driver partition. The car lurched forward, tires spinning against the slush before gripping the asphalt. Keisha screamed, pulling Maya into her chest, shielding her daughter's body with her own. Outside the tinted windows, the peaceful snowy street blurred into streaks of white and gray. She saw the silver car from across the street swerve to follow them. But Tony, the driver, took a sharp left, cutting through an alleyway that barely fit the limousine. "What is happening?" Keisha cried, her eyes darting around the luxurious leather interior. Panic rose in her throat. She looked at Salvatore, who was now checking a small pistol he had pulled from a hidden holster. Are you the police?" For a black woman in her position, the police could be just as terrifying as criminals. Salvatore looked up, sliding the weapon back out of sight when he saw Maya's terrified eyes. "No, madam. I am not the police." "Then who are you?" Keisha pressed, her voice trembling. "Why did those men follow us? Did I do something wrong?" "You did nothing," Salvatore said, his voice returning to that calm, gravelly rumble. "They are following me. And because I helped you, They think you are important to me. Which means you are now targets. Keisha felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Maya, who was clutching the bakery box as if it were a life raft. Stop the car, Keisha whispered. Let us out. We'll walk. We're used to walking. If I let you out, Salvatore said grimly, you won't make it 2 blocks. Those men, they don't have the same code I do. The car hit a bump, and Maya gasped. But then, in the strange, tense silence that followed, a small voice piped up. Mr. Giant. Salvatore blinked, looking down. Maya had opened the pink box. The smell of fresh strawberries and sweet cream filled the leather-scented air of the car, a bizarre contrast to the danger outside. She held up a large, chocolate-dipped strawberry. You look hungry, Maya said innocently. Mama says when you're grumpy, you should eat something sweet. Keisha tried to stop her. Maya, no. But Salvatore's face softened. The hard lines around his eyes, etched by years of violence and difficult decisions, seemed to smooth out. He reached out with a hand that had ended lives and gently took the strawberry from the little girl's fingers. Thank you, Piccola, he whispered. He took a bite, savoring the sweetness. My sister, she loved strawberries. She struggled too, you know. She raised a daughter alone when the world turned its back on her. He looked at Keisha, a flash of deep pain crossing his features. I couldn't save her, but I can save you. Keisha stared at him. For the first time, she didn't see a rich white man or a gangster. She saw a human being carrying a ghost. We're almost there, boss, Tony called from the front. The car slowed down, navigating away from the glittering lights of downtown and into the south side, a neighborhood Keisha knew well. It was a place of crumbling brick and flickering streetlights, a place the city often forgot. The limo pulled up to the back entrance of a sturdy, red brick apartment building. It looked old, but the steel-reinforced door suggested it was more than it appeared. Where are we? Keisha asked, clutching Maya's hand. Salvatore opened the door, the cold wind rushing in again, but this time he offered his hand to help her out. A safe place, Salvatore said. Welcome home, Keisha. In this building, nobody looks down on you because of your clothes or your skin. Here, you are under my protection. The safe house was nothing like the cold marble of the bakery. It was a small second-floor apartment with exposed brick walls and a fireplace that crackled with orange warmth. But for Keisha, standing by the window and peering through the blinds at the snow-covered alley below, the warmth felt fragile. Outside, the wind howled like a wolf testing the door. In the center of the room, on a scarred wooden table, sat the strawberry cake. It had survived the car chase, though the frosting was smeared against the cardboard lid. Maya didn't care. She was carefully sticking 7 candles into the soft sponge, her face glowing with a concentration so pure it made Salvatore's heart ache. Do you have a match, Mr. Giant? Maya asked, turning to him. Salvatore sat in a worn armchair, his imposing frame looking out of place in the modest room. He produced a silver lighter, flicked it open, and helped her light the wicks. The tiny flames danced in her dark eyes. Make a wish, Piccola, he whispered. Maya closed her eyes tight. I wish Mama doesn't have to cry anymore. Keisha turned from the window, a sob catching in her throat. She walked over and sat opposite Salvatore, watching him cut a slice for her daughter with the precision of a surgeon. Why? Keisha asked, her voice raw. Why us? You said I reminded you of your sister. Was she? Keisha gestured vaguely to her own skin. Salvatore nodded slowly, staring into the fire. Adopted. My parents took her in when she was a baby. In our neighborhood, an Italian family raising a black girl. It was not easy. People talked. People stared. Just like that woman in the bakery. He took a sip of water, his hand trembling slightly, a vulnerability he never showed his enemies. She worked herself to death, Salvatore continued, his voice rough with regret. 2 jobs. 3 jobs. Trying to prove she was good enough for a world that didn't want her. I had all this power, all this money, but I couldn't stop the cancer that took her. I was too late. He looked at Keisha, his eyes burning with intensity. When I saw you today, hiding your pride to feed your child, I saw her. And I promised myself, not this time. Keisha reached across the table, covering his large, tattooed hand with her rough, work-worn one. You aren't a bad man, Salvatore. You're just hurting. For a moment, there was peace. A family formed not by blood, but by broken pieces fitting together. Click. The sudden sound of the apartment lights dying plunged them into darkness, save for the dying embers of the fire. Get down, Tony hissed from the kitchen window, rocking the slide of his shotgun. They cut the power. We've got movement in the alley. 2 cars. Maybe 6 men. Salvatore's phone rang. The screen lit up the dark room with a ghostly blue light. The caller ID read, unknown. Salvatore answered, putting it on speaker. You're getting soft, Sal, a voice sneered. Vincent. Picking up strays? I have the building surrounded. Send the woman and the kid out. Maybe I'll let you live. Keisha pulled Maya under the heavy oak table, clutching her tight. If you touch a hair on their heads, Salvatore said, his voice dropping to a demonic growl, I will burn this whole city down with you in it. Then burn, Vincent laughed. We're coming up. The line went dead. Salvatore stood up. In the flickering firelight, he looked like a titan of old. He placed a heavy pistol on the table, right next to the half-eaten birthday cake. Keisha, he said, his voice steady as stone. Stay behind me. Tonight, nobody dies. The silence of the apartment was shattered by the sound of glass exploding downstairs. Heavy boots stomped on the wooden stairs, making the old building groan in protest. There inside, Tony shouted, overturning the heavy oak table to create a barricade. Stay down. Keisha grabbed Maya and scrambled behind the overturned table, pressing her daughter's face into her chest so she wouldn't see the violence to come. Salvatore stood in the middle of the room, his pistol raised, his face a mask of cold determination. He wasn't just a gangster now, he was a guardian. The door splintered open with a deafening crash. 2 men in dark coats burst in, guns drawn. Salvatore fired twice, not to kill, but to disarm. One man cried out, dropping his weapon and clutching his shoulder. Tony tackled the other, wrestling him to the ground in a chaotic scuffle of limbs and grunts. But there were too many of them. Vincent walked in through the broken doorway, stepping over his fallen man with arrogant ease. He held a silver revolver, leveled directly at Salvatore's chest. It's over, Sal. Vincent sneered, his eyes darting to the trembling mother and child behind the table. All this for them? You really have lost your mind. Salvatore didn't flinch, though his gun clicked empty. Let them go, Vincent. This is between us. No, Vincent laughed, cocking the hammer of his gun. You made it about them when you brought them here. Now say goodbye. Keisha squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the end. She prayed silently, not for herself, but for Maya. But the shot never came. Instead, a new sound filled the hallway. It started as a creak, then a slam, then a chorus of opening doors. Hey, a voice cracked like a whip from the hallway. What do you think you're doing in my building? Vincent spun around, startled. Standing in the doorway wasn't the police, and it wasn't Salvatore's backup. It was Mrs. Gable, the 70-year-old grandmother from apartment 4B. She was wearing a floral nightgown and wielding a heavy cast-iron skillet like a battle axe. Behind her stood Mr. Johnson, a retired janitor holding a baseball bat, and behind him, a dozen other residents. Young men, tired mothers, old veterans. The people of the South Side had come out. Get out of our house, Mrs. Gable commanded, stepping forward fearlessly. Back off, old lady, Vincent shouted, waving his gun nervously. I'll shoot. Then shoot all of us, Mr. Johnson said, stepping up beside her. Because you aren't taking that woman and her baby. Not tonight. They surged forward, a wall of humanity protecting their own. Vincent's men, hardened criminals used to fighting other gangsters, looked uncertain. They didn't know how to fight a neighborhood of angry grandmothers and protective fathers. Distracted by the mob, Vincent took his eyes off Salvatore for a split second. That was all the dawn needed. Salvatore lunged, knocking the gun from Vincent's hand with a swift, brutal strike. He pinned his rival against the wall, his forearm pressing against Vincent's throat. You see, Vincent? Salvatore growled, his face inches from his enemies. You have hard guns. I have a family. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real police, called by the neighbors, were closing in. Vincent's men dropped their weapons, realizing they were trapped between the law and an angry community. As the police dragged a handcuffed Vincent away, he twisted his head back, spitting blood and venom. "You're a fool, Costa. You're a mafia boss. Why are you protecting this trash?" Salvatore straightened his tie, breathing hard but standing tall. He looked at Keisha, who was hugging Mrs. Gable, and then at the neighbors who had risked their lives for strangers. "They aren't trash," Salvatore said, his voice echoing in the stairwell. "They are the only gold in this city that matters." The sun rose over Chicago like a pale gold coin, casting long, peaceful shadows across the snow. Inside the apartment, the terrifying sounds of the night before, the breaking glass, the shouting, the sirens, had been replaced by the sizzling of bacon and the smell of fresh coffee. Tony, the burly bodyguard who usually carried a shotgun, was now wearing a ridiculous apron that said "Kiss the Cook," clumsily flipping pancakes at the small stove. Maya sat at the table, giggling as she watched him. Salvatore stood by the window, watching the sunrise. He had traded his tailored suit jacket for a thick, cable-knit sweater that made him look less like a godfather and more like a grandfather. When Keisha walked out of the bedroom, rested but still cautious, he turned to face her. "Good morning," Salvatore said softly. "Happy Christmas." On the table, amidst the breakfast feast Tony was preparing, sat a single white envelope. Salvatore picked it up and handed it to Keisha. "What is this?" Keisha asked, hesitating. "It is the deed to this apartment," Salvatore said simply. "And the one next door for Mrs. Gable. I bought the building this morning. No landlord can ever evict you again because of your skin color or your bank account. This is your home, Keisha. Forever." Keisha's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside, along with the deed, was a business card for Salvatore's finest restaurant. "Manager position," he added. "I need someone tough to run the front of house. And after seeing you last night, I know you are tough." Tears streamed down Keisha's face. Not tears of humiliation like in the bakery, but tears of disbelief. She looked from the papers to the man who had changed their stars overnight. "Why," she choked out, "we were just strangers asking for expired cake." Salvatore walked over to the table where the battered strawberry cake still sat. He ran a finger along the cardboard box. "Because that expired cake saved me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For 30 years, my heart has been rotting with guilt over my sister. I became a hard man, a cold man. But when you asked for that cake, you reminded me that love is about sacrifice. You saved my soul, Keisha." Maya jumped down from her chair. She ran across the room, ignoring Tony's warning about the hot pancakes, and wrapped her small arms around Salvatore's waist. She buried her face in his sweater. "Thank you, Grandpa Sal," she mumbled. Salvatore froze. The title, one he thought he would never hear, cracked the last layer of ice around his heart. Slowly, his large hand came down to rest on her braided hair. He closed his eyes, and a single tear escaped, tracing a path down his weathered cheek. "You are welcome, Piccola," he breathed. Keisha joined them, placing a hand on Salvatore's shoulder. In that small brick apartment in the south side of Chicago, 3 broken people stood together, forging a bond stronger than blood. Outside, the church bells began to ring, signaling Christmas morning. But the real miracle wasn't in the church. It was right here, in the warmth of a second chance. Sometimes, the greatest miracles begin with the smallest, most broken things, like a mother's desperate whisper or an expired birthday cake. We often judge books by their covers, seeing only poverty or danger, yet underneath lie hearts beating with the same fierce love as our own. Let Salvatore and Keisha's story remind you that when we replace judgment with compassion, we don't just save others. We often save ourselves. So this holiday season, look a little closer at the strangers you meet. You might just find family waiting in the shadows.